is happening more and more often. Emails, letters, phone calls, Facebook messages from friends, preachers, even individuals I don't know. People who, out of the blue, contact me and let me know that one of their children have gone astray. Children who maybe were reared in a church setting, believed in a God, went to Bible class. Some of these young people even went on to a Christian university, only to one day eventually walk away, turn their back on not only the home, but also the church. Friends, it's an epidemic. I think if we were honest with ourselves, we'd recognize the fact that we're losing our kids. And I'm all in favor of sending money, sending help, sending support overseas. In fact, my wife and I, we support personally some missionaries. We do mission work. I've committed part of my time each and every year to trying to get overseas and help to spread the truth. But I think it's time that we start realizing maybe it's time we invest in our own spiritual families. Ken Ham wrote a book just a couple of short months ago, he and another co-author, titled Already Gone. And in that particular book, they actually outlined the fact that according to their research, according to statistics, while we do see a lot of our young people leaving 18, 19, 20 years of age, leaving the church, realistically, according to this denominational study, our kids are already gone by age 11, 12, 13. You see, folks, in their minds, what we're doing Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night is not relevant. They're learning about history. They're learning about biology. They're learning about all of these different aspects in school 5 days a week. And then Sunday morning, Wednesday night, they learn Bible. They learn about God. And the two never, ever meet. They're already gone. There's a history book that was published that I was told about, copyrighted roughly 2008, that gives several pages of description on a man by the name of George Washington Carver. Many of you may in fact be aware of Carver and a lot of the things that he was able to give to our society through his inventions, through his discoveries. But ironically, that same history book neglects George Washington, the founder, the first president of the United States. Now, think with me, how ironic is it that we've got a history book that goes into detail about George Washington Carver, but completely overlooks one of the founders of our nation, the first president of our country, George Washington. Now, you can imagine a lot of folks have been a little bit upset about that, and in fact, I hope that that upsets you a little bit, the fact that in many situations we're rewriting history. But the point that I don't want you to miss, and this is why I believe that many of our young people are already gone, is folks, for decades, and I mean decades, our history books have erased the founder of our universe, Jehovah God. You see the problem? It's one thing to say, oh, this book doesn't contain George Washington, the first president. But folks, our history books do not contain any information about the founder of the world. You see, the atheists, the evolutionists have done an exceptional job of expunging the very existence of God. I want us to spend some time together right now talking about how we can know there is a God. If I were an evolutionist, how would you prove it? You know, there's a lot of emphasis right now out on the internet trying to prove to our kids that there is no God. In fact, just a few short weeks ago, there was an article that appeared in one of the mainstream media papers talking about the process of de-baptism. There's a group that is is actively pursuing people who were baptized younger in life and who are now wanting, quote, out of that. Believe it or not, they actually do talk about using a hairdryer for this particular process. But if I were an atheist, how would you convince me that there is a God? Let's make it a little more personal. If I'm your child, if I was your grandchild, how do you prove that there is a God? For you see, if I'm your child or your grandchild, I have been to school systems where I've learned the scientific method. I've learned that if you can't touch it, taste it, hear it, smell it, feel it, it's not real. The scientific method saying you need to use those five senses, be able to go into a laboratory, measure something, and reproduce those results. But folks, the Bible is very clear that God is a spirit. Those who worship Him must worship Him in spirit and in truth. So where does that leave God with the scientific method? Now think, if I were to ask you, can you prove Abraham Lincoln is real? Now, think with me. I don't think anybody's still living who actually saw Abraham Lincoln. So how do you know for sure that Abraham Lincoln truly did exist? Or for those who haven't been overseas, how do you know that there really is a Great Wall of China? And you say, well, Dr. Harrub, we've got the writings of Abraham Lincoln. We've got his childhood home in Kentucky. We've got images of him. We have evidence that Abraham Lincoln lived. And in fact, talking about the Great Wall of China, if you give me a computer that is hooked up to the internet, within 2 minutes we can zoom down from a satellite and we can be looking at it. We have evidence for these. But let's be honest. As I mentioned, God is a spirit. We can't use our five senses to prove He's real. So how do we prove to our children and our grandchildren that there really is a God? There's several ways we can do that. I want us to look at just two during our time together. Two of the best arguments to prove the existence of God. One is the cosmological argument. We know, for instance, the cosmos exists. The question is, where did it come from? If you think about it for just a moment, we could actually use that same argument for this old car. We know this car exists. How did it get here? We know the universe exists. How did it get here? Let me tell you how I plan on teaching my own children about the existence of God. When they start to get of age where they start rationing things, they start using logic, and they start trying to figure out their own faith, I'm going to walk them outside, I'm going to point up to the night sky, and I'm simply going to say, how do you think all this stuff got here? For you see, my children, my grandchildren can see the stars, they can see the moon, they know physically they exist. The question is, where did they come from? Now, friends, realistically, there's only three logical explanations. Now, you may think of some other possibilities as you're thinking about this, but I promise you, the more you think about it, the more you'll realize they only fit into one of these three groups. Those three categories are these. Number one, the universe is eternal. Or if we go back to our car for just a moment, this car is eternal, meaning it's always been here. Or option number two, this car is not eternal, but rather it created itself from nothing. Likewise, we look up at the universe. The universe is not eternal, but rather it just popped into existence. Or option number three, the universe is not eternal. It didn't create itself, but rather it was created by something or someone anterior and superior to it. Likewise, we turn our attention to this particular car. We say, okay, three options: eternal, created itself, or it was created. Let's look at each one of those for just a moment. We'll focus most of our attention on the idea of the universe. Now, I need you to understand, as you're looking at this logically, and you're looking at how this lays out, you can actually use just about anything. You can use a car. You can even use a shoe. Where'd the universe come from? Where did my shoe come from? The first option that we have to look at is that it's eternal. Always been here. Now, folks, you look at that particular option, you realize, scientifically speaking, that's no good. Einstein wanted it to be that way. In fact, he came up with a cosmological constant. Einstein wanted this universe to be eternal because he knew if it had a beginning, that implied that there was a creator. Those of you who know about Einstein's constant, his cosmological constant, he considers it the greatest mistake of his entire lifelong career. For those of you who really know the story, here's what happened. Einstein believed that there was a possibility that the universe was expanding. A fellow by the name of Edwin Hubble called Einstein, had him come out to his observatory. They began to look out into space, and Edwin Hubble pointed out something called the redshift. He pointed out the fact that things were, in fact, moving. He told Einstein, he said, I'm proving what you thought about. Einstein left the laboratory basically saying, while I don't want to admit it, things are expanding. He eventually had to toss away his cosmological constant. You see, from a scientific perspective, we know this universe is expanding. We know it had a beginning. All you need to do in order to prove that to yourself, to prove that to your children, maybe to prove it to a coworker, is simply look at a spiral galaxy. Because you see, folks, in that one picture, you can recognize the fact that, yes, things have changed over time. This is not a static universe. Evolutionist Robert Jastrow, he made this admission. I want you to listen very carefully to what he said. He said, the lingering decline predicted by astronomers for the end of the world differs from the explosive conditions that they have calculated for its birth. But the impact is the same. Modern science denies an eternal existence to the universe, either in the past or the future. Option number one, it's unscientific. It's no good. Likewise, we look at this car, we ask the question, is this car eternal? Has it always been here? Folks, I think anybody with common sense recognizes this hasn't been here forever. They didn't build a warehouse around this particular car. Option number one, it's no good. Option number two, this universe is not eternal, but rather it created itself from nothing. Now, if you are an evolutionist, an atheist, you don't really care for option number three at all, because that implies a supernatural creator. You can call him anything you want to, but ultimately it would be who many recognize as God. They don't like the God option. Option number one is unscientific. That only leaves them option number two. Now, consider where that puts you if you're an evolutionist or an atheist, to have to stand behind the claim that all of this just sprang into existence from nothing. So what do? They try to shrink it down to a very small point in place in space. Blow a little smoke in your face, hoping you won't see it, and say that that's where everything came from. In fact, I want to read to you a quote from Alan Guth. Alan Guth gave an interview in Omni magazine several years back, and he was asked about how big was this very early pre-inflation universe. Here's how he answered it. He said, amazingly small, almost 10 to the minus 24 centimeters across. Smaller, he says, than a proton. He said, also amazing, it would have contained only about 25 pounds of matter. Folks, what's my next question? Where did that 25 pounds come from? You see, he hasn't explained the existence of the universe. All he's done is shrunk it down to 25 pounds. Again, I would ask you, how logical is it for somebody to believe that everything around us in this universe originated from 25 pounds? The only option remaining is that God or something superior created this universe. Something anterior and superior to it. It's a self-evident truth that nothing produces nothing. In view of this, since something now exists, we know something has existed forever. I'm here to tell you today that something is God. Again, folks, you can use this argument with just about anything. You look at this car, you say, okay, three options. It's eternal, it created itself from nothing, or it was created. You look at your shoe, you say, okay, it was eternal. It popped into existence as I was walking down the street wearing socks one day. Or it was created. Now, I think any logical person looking at my shoes recognizes the fact that they're definitely not eternal. They've been worn down quite a bit. And I also think that most honest people realize the ridiculousness of saying those shoes just sprang into existence from nothing. Atheists, evolutionists, I think skeptics would all agree my shoe was built by somebody. Let's continue the process on back then. The shoe builder, that shoemaker, is he eternal? Did he get here from nothing, or was he created? You see, the further you push this thing back, eventually you realize we come to a point where we are looking at a universe where you can't go back any further. You have to answer that question. Did it spring into existence from nothing? We know scientifically it hadn't always been here. Or was it created? Folks, the evidence is very clear. The universe that you and I depend on, the universe that you and I can look up into that night sky and we see all the majesty, the splendor, is proof that there is a God. NASA astronomer John O'Keefe, he put it this way. He said, we are, by astronomical standards, a pampered, cosseted, cherished group of creatures. He said, if the universe had not been made with the most exacting precision, we could have never come into existence. It is my view that these circumstances indicate that the universe was created for man to live in. You want proof that there is a God? The very existence of this universe proves there had to be something there. Richard Dawkins says, okay, then who created God? It's one of his favorite crutches. Richard Dawkins, very well-known atheist of our time. Folks, what he is looking for, his argument is an argument ad infinitum, meaning it would go on forever. If I gave Richard Dawkins the answer, I said, you know what? God came from X. Richard Dawkins' very next question is, where'd X come from? Gee, it's an argument that can go on forever. The problem is, Richard Dawkins, although he may be a great writer, sometimes he lacks what I would call common sense. The whole idea of eternality has completely bypassed his mind. We know something exists today. We can see it. We can physically touch it. If something exists today, that means something has existed forever, because something can't come from nothing. So Richard Dawkins and others like him have now leaned towards an alternative. The idea that maybe what's going to happen is that this universe is going to expand out to a point and then contract on itself. Basically, you can kind of think of it as blowing up a balloon as much as you can until it reaches that point where it all shrinks back on itself. They would say that this is what's going to happen to the universe. Billions of years, it's going to continue expanding until it gets pulled back onto itself, shrinking down to nothing, and then it'll snap back out. And they say that this is a cyclic period of expansions and contractions and expansions and contractions, and that's how they try to get around the idea of explaining the very existence of matter. The one question I would ask is this: how much scientific evidence do we have for that? Folks, it does take more faith to be an atheist than it does to believe in the one true living God. When you look at the evidence around you, you ask that question, is there a God? Folks, the universe itself declares and demands that there is a God. As you're thinking about your own children, your grandchildren, I would ask you to ask yourself, in all seriousness, are they already gone? For you see, there's a lot of 11, 12, 13-year-olds right now who are comfortably sitting in a Bible class, and they're learning the accounts in God's Word. They're learning about Abraham and Sarah. They're learning about the flood. They're learning about the crucifixion. But the question is, do they even know there's a God out there? Do they know why they believe what they believe? One more example of how we can prove that there is a God. Aside from the cosmological argument, there's the anthropological argument, the morals argument. And this is an argument that atheists do not like. Morals exist. You know, if I were to get into this particular automobile and I run a red light because I want to get somewhere in a hurry, I think most of us realize that's breaking the law. Running a red light, running a stop sign, or if I go as fast as I can down the interstate. You see, our society has designated certain behaviors as right and certain ones as wrong. The question is, okay, what makes those right and wrong? Has it ever occurred to you that morals, as George Gaylord Simpson said, only arise in man? We look at behaviors like murder, rape, lying, stealing. We look at things like cheating, arson, drunk driving, infanticide. All of these behaviors, normal people would recognize as wrong. But folks, in order for something to be wrong, it demands that there is an absolute standard. What's that standard? You know, even atheists recognize those as wrong behaviors. I have an opportunity on many occasions to correspond with skeptics, with people who are not sure whether there's a God. And one of the questions I always ask them is simply this: would you mind if I break into your home, rob you blind, and kill your family? Now, let me just make sure you understand, I would never do that. But they always respond the same way. They always say, absolutely, they don't want me doing that. They realize that is wrong behavior. Folks, this time you've only got two options of where morals came from. That standard of right and wrong. Either man has originated morals, or we've originated God's unchanging standards. If you're an atheist, if you're a skeptic, obviously you've only got one option. That is that mankind himself, is the standard for morality, for what is right and wrong. What's the problem with that? Well, several problems. Number one, who gets to decide? Who gets to decide ultimately what is right and wrong? Number two, men change. How would we know what is ultimately right or what is ultimately wrong? You see, there was a man by the name of Adolf Hitler who believed that what he was doing was right. He thought he was creating the perfect race. And yet ultimately what he did was he extinguished millions of Jews in a Holocaust that we now today recognize as one of the greatest atrocities to mankind. You see, here's the plight of an atheist. They recognize the fact that morals exist. They don't believe in a God, and so they're left with the notion that man came up with morals on their own. So, let's think for just a moment. Our kids are learning evolution, natural selection, the idea of survival of the fittest. So I find out that One of my coworkers and I are going to go interview for the same job. It's a job that pays $500,000 a year. We really both want that job. And maybe I recognize that my coworker is more qualified for that job. I find out he has a 1 o'clock interview, I have a 1:30. But I really want that job. Survival of the fittest, evolution, morals. So I just walk out, roughly about 12:30, I slash all 4 of his tires. He misses the interview, I make mine, I get the job. Problem? What's the problem with that? Because folks, in my eyes, it was a good thing. I got the job. Survival of the fittest. Folks, I think you understand morals exist. We know they do. The only option that makes logical sense is that man has adopted God's standard for right and wrong. You see, the Bible tells us that God is immutable. He doesn't change. In fact, the Bible lists many characteristics about God. It says that He is eternal, that He is just, that ultimately whatever He commands is for our good. Whatever He approves is for our good. We know, in fact, that God is holy. Jehovah God is just. He is righteous. He is forever consistent, according to Scripture. So as we look at a list like that and we recognize God is unchangeable, He's immovable, we start to begin to understand where morals came from. Many years ago, they did an experiment where they went on to some of the South Pacific Islands, and they interviewed folks who were indigenous to those particular regions. And they purposefully made sure that they were talking to individuals who could not communicate with each other. They asked them things like, what are your laws? What do you view as right and wrong? And on these islands, each one of the cultures viewed things like murder, adultery, lying, stealing as wrong. As you listen to that list, murder, adultery, lying, stealing, do you realize that we have accepted across the culture lines, across our national boundaries, those behaviors as wrong? Again, friends, I think when we examine the evidence, when we look at the fact that there are morals, they had to come from somewhere. I think an honest person recognizes the very existence of morals themselves points to the existence of God. It's not a secret that you walk into bookstores today and they're just absolutely a barrage of atheistic books. Men like Christopher Hitchens, who writes God is Not Great, How Religion Poisons Everything, or Richard Dawkins, The God Delusion, Sam Harris's End of Faith. I want to give you in just a couple of short minutes what I would call 7 easy proofs that there is a God. Proof number 1, every creation must have a creator. Hebrews chapter 3, verse 4, for every house is built by someone, but he who built all things is God. We know matter exists, so the question is, where did it come from? Proof number 2, every design must have a designer. We look at clothing patterns, and we realize that to make a dress, you have that design, somebody had to come up with that particular design. Proof number 3, codes require someone to program the code. You know, we're constantly looking out into space trying to receive codes and information, and yet inside each one of our cells there's a code that took us roughly 13 years to finally break. It's called DNA. It cost us millions of dollars. Hundreds of labs were in on the DNA Human Genome Project. Codes require someone to program the code. Proof number 4, for every material effect, there must be an adequate cause that existed prior to that effect. This is known as the law of cause and effect. If I were to tell you that a small little frog caused a tsunami wave, you'd realize that's not a big enough cause to make that effect. Well, folks, we know the universe exists. What caused it? Proof number 5, laws require a lawgiver. James chapter 4, verse 12. There is one lawgiver who is able to save and to destroy. I think all of us recognize that laws exist. The law of gravity. When you got up out of bed this morning, you expected your feet to go down and not up. We know about the laws of momentum. Laws require a lawgiver. Proof number 6, moral code. Where'd it come from? We spent some time during this lesson looking at the idea of morals existing. Where did it come from? Last but not least, proof number 7, communication requires a communicator. Thankfully, God created man with the ability to communicate, to talk, to reason. We have that ability. Where did it come from, and why haven't other animals evolved that ability? Again, those 7 proofs. Every creation must have a creator. Every design must have a designer. Codes require a programmer. The law of cause and effect. We also know that laws require a lawgiver. Number 6, the origin of the moral code. And number 7, communication requires a communicator. Your children need to know that God exists. In just this short time together, we've looked at 2 ways. Number 1, the cosmological argument. The idea that the universe exists. How did it get here? 3 options. Eternal, it popped into existence from nothing, or it was created. We said the same thing could be used for something like this old marathon car. We also looked at the existence of morals. The fact that mankind, unlike animals, recognizes certain behaviors as right and wrong. And that it's illogical to think that men can come up with the ideas of right and wrong and be consistent. Folks, the very existence of the universe, the very existence of morals, proves beyond the shadow of a doubt that there is a God. My question is, are you going to teach this evidence to your children and grandchildren? It's time that faithful Christians start thinking multi-generational faith. Not just learn a little bit and hope maybe that our kids get some, but learn it, teach it, and pass it on to that next generation. You got to think in that chain-like mentality. You need to teach your kids why they believe what they believe.